The VC Project.
So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, I was going to talk about that green screen, but not anymore. So why don't we talk about room design and questions that the customer has when we go in for a site survey for a conference room?
So you're just going to dive right into it, huh?
I think we should do that. I want this to be as precise as possible. This is going to be one of the rare education only focused episodes,
Okay.
but we got so many good things to get in here.
So hold on. So you want to talk about conference rooms, which is a lot of what we do, right? And so we're going to talk about what pretty much the design and how we come up with the design, or
I want to focus on customer questions. So when
okay.
to a customer that doesn't necessarily have the background in AV. Some of our customers do, some of them don't. Basically, for those customers who do not have that AV background, what are the questions that we're answering when we're going in on this site survey? And what is our end product? What is it going to solve? And how do we get there? How do we design that room as precise as possible? And what are we asking to get there?
Okay, so what I'm thinking is, because this is common, right? So we get a lot of people who, I don't know, they'll ask us questions. They say, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z. Our problem is this. We need you to solve this. We need to achieve this for our meetings, for hybrid working, or whatever it might be. Why is it, did you pick this product, or why did you pick this size of thing, or why are you doing, the whys behind what it is that we do, right?
100%. And on top of that, for that person that calls us and says, hey, we've been just connecting an HDMI to a projector here. What can we do with this room? The people that have no idea where we're coming in.
Because they're always looking to us for the ideas.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where, luckily for those people, they haven't. Is this camera facing me right now?
Hold on. I'll switch it.
We need to get it there.
Right there.
We have a friendly animal guide to let you know how your conference room should be configured.
It's not an animal guide. Come on now. I like to do fun things when I make a document up, right? So.
I did not like it at first, but the more I look at this is a separator in the world of material.
That's what I was going for when we were talking about marketing. Okay. So you got the things to consider guide when you're designing a conference room, right? Things that clients ask us. It's great that you brought that along to kind of stimulate some questions and everything. So, okay, let's dive right into it. What's the first topic? When you go out as a salesperson, what's one of the questions you get asked the most?
For me, it's the display. Is it going to be a projector? Is it going to be an LED? There's a whole bunch of things that go into it. But to me, when you walk into a conference room, you don't see the microphone that's in the ceiling. You're not supposed to see the speakers that are there. The one thing you're going to see is how is that image that they're presenting brought into the room. So to me, that's kind of where we start to figure out what is the best option for them.
Okay, so maybe what is the display technology and why we're selecting certain technology, or we might lean towards a certain technology, and perhaps even how big of a display do you need? Right.
To me, it starts with the size of the display, because from that size of the display, we're already able to answer some questions right there. Do they need a massive screen? Okay, if they need a massive screen, we're either going to be an LED or a projector. It's either going to be a video wall or a projector. And then from that point, you can kind of get a sense of where their budget's going to land to which path you're going to direct them. Obviously, in a perfect world, we would put LED walls in every conference room we go in if it can't be a 55, 75, 85.
I would love to sell that many LED video walls in every conference room that we do, yes.
So for me, it's size of the display that's either in there already or what they're going for in the size of the room.
Okay, so let's take it back to a fundamental level. Okay, so there's a lot that goes into selecting display size, and I think that's what people don't understand, right? So as the design engineer, one of the things that I want to make everybody clear about is, we'll have people come to us or you'll come to me and say, hey, they want to do this conference room. They want a 55-inch display at the front of the table. And hey, the furthest person sitting away is 21 feet away, right? I immediately am like, no, Pat, it's not happening, right? They're going to have to buy an 85. Why am I selecting that? Why does the client, because the cost of an 85-inch flat panel versus the cost of a 55-inch flat panel, drastically different, right? So it kind of comes down to why I'm selecting the size that we're selecting. And I can tell you right now, it's twofold. It's all based on math and science, right? So we don't want to bore everybody too much, but the big picture is how the human eye sees things and how tight the text is, right, determines how far away you can be when you're reading text on an Excel sheet or something, right? So in the world that we live in, our trade association is called AVIXA. They write standards for this thing. They have a standard, it's called the Discus standard. You can go to avixa.org and you can download this thing, right? But the long and short of it is, you want to be able to read the text from the back of the room. So you have to determine how big you want that text to be. So a line of text, we would call that an element, but it could be a CAD drawing for detailed, whatever, from a marketing person that's looking at advertising. The element could be a specific thing like a mole on someone's face, or, depending on, if it's an artistic rendering of something and you want to see whatever that detail is. So there's two ways that we look at screen size. Does the resolution matter? Yes, it always does. But if we're making decisions that are basic, or are we making decisions that need to be like super accurate and tight, that kind of determines the math that goes to each one, right? The super tight, and we want to get really in on pixel by pixel, like, discernment, we typically go with the analytical decision-making math versus the basic decision-making math. But what we're talking about today is really sticking in the basic decision-making process. Excel sheets, PowerPoints, simple presentations, videos, that kind of jazz that you're going to see in a conference room, right? So by that math, what we determine is, and if you make the element or the text 3% of the total screen size, so resolution doesn't matter, it's just percentage based, right? So 3% of that total screen size will give you a multiplier of 6 to the screen height. I know it's math, it gets crazy, but we determine now, how do you measure displays? You just measure them diagonally, right? And the reason they do that is a whole marketing thing. Marketing departments got a hold of televisions and that kind of stuff back in the day. That's the longest number you can get, is your diagonal number. So they could say, hey, the screen is 85 inches instead of going by width or height, which would obviously be much smaller, right? So our math, however, and the way the science works, goes off of screen height, right? So the screen height times 6 is going to be the furthest away you want that viewer. So basically, the long and short of it is, 21 feet away, you want an 85-inch diagonal display, and that's based on the height, not the diagonal, just how that works out, if your elements are about 3%. I think that works out to like a 12-point font standard on a 1080p display, right? So that's kind of how we determine screen size. We do the math. What's your furthest viewer? What's your closest viewer? Because there's some math behind the closest viewer too. You don't want to be too close to a TV that's that big, right? But it's run that math, run those numbers. It will determine that you need an 85-inch display.
And this form, if you will, or this guide has that completely lined out. It has your furthest viewer and then a graph showing the size of the display from 55 all the way up to a 165. And obviously you can go bigger than that, determining it's not going to usually happen in a conference room, but when you get into your auditoriums and other things,
right,
it can even get bigger.
We did the math for you in that sheet, right, to say, hey, you need an 85, you need a 75. How big of a TV am I going to need, right? Now the next determination becomes display technology type, right? 9 times out of 10, we're putting in flat panel displays. They give you better color, better brightness, better contrast. We have to keep them within 4 inches off the wall for ADA compliance. That's a whole nother thing. But typically that's our go-to. Now, projection used to be the way to go when you needed to get bigger than 80 inches. Now we have 85-inch flat panels, 98-inch flat panels that are still more cost-effective than projection systems now. Because when you put projectors in, you need to worry about infrastructure costs like power and screen and all that other stuff that's going to go with it. But sometimes you need bigger than a 98-inch flat panel. The way to go there is typically still projection, because that's what's the most affordable. However, in really high-end corporate boardrooms, we're going with direct view LED walls. So what's direct view LED? We'll do a whole nother podcast on that entire topic here soon, right? But the long and short of it is, for all the listeners out there, think of the big digital billboards you see on the side of the interstate as you drive down the street, shrunken down and put into a conference room.
They're beautiful displays. They're more expensive, but anytime that the budget allows, it really makes for a nice conference room.
And even with projection, there's different types of display technology. There's LCD projection, 1-chip DLP projection, 3-chip DLP projection. And that's kind of the hierarchy of low to mid to high end when you're talking about cost, right? And there's different reasonings for doing one versus the other. K through 8 schools might do LCD because it's really cost effective, right? Where our most average conference room will do 1-chip DLP, and then our really high-end auditoriums that need really good color depth and picture are going to do 3-chip DLPs. That's pretty much where your theaters are at, your movie theaters and really high-end kind of auditoriums. And then everything now is pretty much laser-based, right? projectors before used to take a lamp, like a light bulb per se, right? You stick it in the side and then it runs for 1,000, 2,000 hours. You got to change the lamp. It's $500 every time you change it. Now it's laser light engines driving these things, so we're not worried about that kind of stuff. And lasers are cooler because they keep the brightness for longer. They don't dim off over time and go up and down in fluctuation. They keep a better color space. So it's really cool kind of how we're picking. But for the most part, your average size conference room, 75, 80-inch flat panel display, and then the kind of tweaks from there. So, I mean, that's the long and short of your flat panel design, at least when I look at things. So
Yeah.
what are the other questions you get when we're talking about conference rooms?
From after the display, we usually go to the camera situation. Is it going to be one camera? Is it going to be two? Obviously, the presenter in most cases, well, all the cases, is going to be picked up. Then it becomes, does the audience, do you want a view of the audience for any reason, or who's ever sitting at that table? So it's a camera question, how many do you want? And they're kind of the functionality of that camera. And I think that's where you can expand a little bit.
So the functionality of the camera comes down to, is it, everybody knows the webcams you put on your desk, right? Or above your monitor on your computer. Just gives you a nice fixed wide shot, right? Sometimes we do that with a smaller conference room or a huddle room. Sits on top of the display, below the display, gives you a nice eye to eye, just gives you a wide shot. That's all you really need. Take it a step up from there, and you've got your pan, tilt, and zoom cameras, right? They go a lot further. They don't get as wide, but for bigger conference rooms, they work really well. You're always going to have typically just one at the front. Now, when you're talking about auditorium spaces, lecture spaces, that's when we really start getting into all of the different angles of cameras, where the presenter might be walking. Do we get into auto tracking? So it grabs onto your facial recognition and follows you around as a presenter or lecturer moves within the auditorium space.
Talk a little bit about that, because that's one thing we get asked all the time is, hey, can we have that technology that picks up whoever's in the room and focuses right on that person?
Yeah, and they make a lot of systems that do that. The only really good ones are really expensive, tens of thousands of dollars, but man, they're worth it, because if you're paying a production guy to move a camera and follow the operator, that's going to be just as expensive, and your ROI is going to be quicker on those tracking cameras. But they track a number of different ways. They used to track with like a little IR beacon that the instructors or whoever could wear. The camera would follow that beacon. Then they got a little bit smarter, and they would start to sense motion. They would lock onto motion, but then if you had people walking in the background, they might move away. Now we're getting into facial recognition. So it will actually grab onto the presenter, know that it's them. You can set the ranges at which the camera moves. And even with AI technology now, it's recognizing the face of the projectors, and will put their name at the bottom of the screen if you wanted to go that far.
Is that utilizing voice as well? So it'll hear that voice. And
so there are some tracking cameras. So if you think about, you're at the front of a room down here, and you've got that flat panel. Let's say we're in a conference room, and down here where this green screen's at, we've got a flat panel, right? You can put in kind of all-in-one conferencing solution bars, and those are kind of cool because they're a microphone, they're a speaker, they're a camera. They've got the auto tracking in it, so we've got what we call electronic pan tilt zoom. There's two different ways to do it. You can put actual physical pan tilt zooms at the end of a conference table for a bigger place, and they'll track with the with the motion, and they'll track with sound. So they have beam forming microphones that shoot out, and depending on where it's at, it calculates how far you are, moves camera 2, switches to the it does kind of a production view for you. The newer ones are starting to get more into motion tracking than they are microphone tracking, but they do use a combination of both. And if it's not the pan tilt zoom physical cameras, they're doing it with electronic pan tilt zooming, which, pros and cons to that. Some people like it, some people don't. I remember when Teams did a feature, when they did an update a couple of years ago, they turned it on for everybody automatically. They do their own electronic pan tilting and zoom. So you get your wide shot camera at the end, and then it would know who's talking, kind of sense that, and try to move into that person, right? And that can be kind of annoying if it's not done well. That's why I said the most expensive systems are the better systems, and the cheaper you go, well, you kind of get what you pay for, right?
Right. And once the camera is decided upon, move on to the audio. For the space, is it best to have ceiling speakers? Are they going to be placed somewhere else? And each room kind of dictates that. What do you prefer if you have the choice? If you're building a conference room from scratch, what is the ideal type of speaker situation in your mind?
So audio is the most complex, right? I like to say that audio design is still more of an art, where video is not necessarily an art. It's more science, ones and zeros, right? The picture's on the screen and it looks good and you can read it, or you can't, right? With audio, you're dealing with acoustics, and it's a whole nother animal. And yes, I know My degree's in acoustics, so I have a tendency to be a little bit more picky about that kind of thing.
Without a doubt, you
right?
are.
But it's true, right? Any call or conference that you do can take place without video, if you want to be honest, right? I mean, only recently, closer to the pandemic, did more and more people get video, because it used to be a super expensive thing to have. Then it became software based, then it became cheaper, and then it became free, right? So yeah, I mean, you can, if your video dies, you can still have your conference. If your audio dies, you cannot, right? So audio is the most critical. So there's a couple things to think about, right? Where do you put the speakers so that you hear everything? You want even coverage and distribution throughout the room. But I also like audio to come from the source. So if you're seeing people down here, right, on the screen, I want the audio to come from those people. So I'm a big fan of front firing speakers from the display, coming from the source, being the far end of a video call, or the source of the video or presentation that I'm watching, right? However, larger rooms dictate more speakers in the ceiling, right? The next step from there is what we call acoustic echo cancellation. Because when you're on a call, I mean, everybody's heard feedback, right? So you go into a space or a rock concert and someone yells into the microphone, it comes out of the speakers, the microphone picks it back up, you get that really loud squeal, right? That everybody covers their ears and freaks out, right? Acoustic echo cancellation is kind of like that, but with the far end of a video call. So the best way I can explain this is someone in another room talks. It comes through my speakers, out of the ceiling speakers, into this microphone, and back to the other room where they hear themselves. And there's a delay because that takes time, right? So everybody's done this on a conference call. You've heard an echo when you talk, right? All that means is acoustic echo cancellation is not properly set up on one side of the call, okay? There's a reason why when you see Zoom advertised or any of these WebEx or any of these software-based companies, everybody on a call has a headset on, because you don't have that problem with the headset. There's no audio leaving your ear that's going to ever get into this microphone, right? But in a room, you have to deal with the acoustics of that. You have to deal with the speakers getting into the microphone. So acoustic echo cancellation is going to take the audio from that far end and bring it into my speakers. It's going to hit my microphone. There's nothing we can do to prevent that, and go back through that processor. And what that processor is going to do is take that sound out and only know my voice and send my voice to the other end. So you
cool technology.
never, and it's super hard to do. It used to be. The algorithms now are just great, right? They're super, whoever's writing the algorithms for these processing systems are fantastic, right? So now we've got that technology. And what's interesting enough is you could, if we did this here in this room and we invested $20,000 to do a really nice conference room, acoustic echo cancellations, microphones, speakers, the whole works, and we hear an echo, someone's going to complain, why am I hearing an echo and I just spent all this money, right? What most people don't understand is the acoustic echo cancellation does nothing for you. You buy it, it only helps the people on the other end. If you're hearing your echo, they don't have their AEC set up correctly, right?
Yeah, and then that segues us into, one of the most pivotal parts in the room is the microphone. Is that going to live on the table? Is it going to be in the ceiling?
Yeah.
What type?
Yes. Okay. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're looking at, people want their microphones to be hidden. We used to drop them down from the ceiling, and it would sound kind of thin and hollow and would pick up the entire room, right? Just picks up everything, right? I'm still a fan of ceiling microphones, but I like the newer ceiling microphone technology, and Sennheiser, Clear One, Shure. There's a bunch of, there's a bunch of people that have it. Shure is one of my favorites. We'll have somebody from Shure in here to talk about that in a couple of weeks, right? And specifically this technology. But for the most part, the microphone that I'm talking about replaces like a 2x2 ceiling grid, hides up in the ceiling. It's no drop down of cable or wire. They're directional microphones. There's 8 of them in there that point specifically to seats. So it's only going to get me right here. If I start walking around the back of the room, you might hear a little bit, but really it's not going to pick it up because you're out of the pattern of the microphone. It's almost like I'm here, and then now you're back away from the table and you're right. And then I come back into the pattern of where that beam is at. And so it eliminates that noise kind of on the other side.
It can be a wider beam, though. Correct me, 15 feet about on each side.
Yeah, the beams can change. And actually now they're smart enough to where they're shifting and they're moving, right? And a lot of times you got to remember that people are shifted this direction, right? So you got your flat panel and it's up here, so I'm going to be facing this direction. So what I don't want is a microphone from the ceiling behind me, because the microphone's going to be pointing like this, right? It's going to just hit the back of my head. So we want it a little bit more closer to the front. that said, how I talked about speakers being on the flat panels, now you could put those same, beam steering microphones on the flat panel itself. So now it's shooting out into the room as I'm facing it. And so I'm talking, you're getting that kind of interaction, right? Table microphones are still a big thing. I like them. Anytime you can get the microphone capsule closer to the person, you're going to get much better audio quality and much less problems when it comes to echo cancellation. And if you're reinforcing that sound or playing the sound back locally some way, it's always going to sound better, right? Problem with table microphones are they can be annoying because there's a bunch of them always on the table. Even if there's only one or two, they're still on the table. Sometimes they go right back here behind. As soon as I flip my laptop up, well, now my laptop screen is blocking me from getting to that microphone. So it's like you're going to go start to hear this sound here where it's just completely blocked versus something like this, right? So I like it, but I don't like it. They got the goosenecks that come up and fix that problem. Those are great too, right? But again, it's just aesthetics at that point. Which one do you like? I prefer those 100% of the time. Always going to sound the greatest, but most people don't like the aesthetics behind that and the infrastructure that goes to support that, right?
And Shure has now come up with the 2-in-1 where your microphone and your speaker live in that same ceiling grid.
Yes, same singular 2x2 ceiling grid. It's a great product. It's really only meant for smaller conference rooms. You can't use it in a bigger conference room because remember, there's only one speaker in there. So.
Max length on a conference room like that.
I mean, I wouldn't go much bigger than like a little bigger than the table we're sitting at here.
15 feet?
Yeah, maybe 15, 20 feet. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the size of the table and where the participants are sitting and things like that. But yeah, you could typically do that. Now, there's one other type of microphone technology. We're going to have someone on to talk about that as well, which they're called conference systems, but it's for really large. So think of a boardroom with 100 people or an auditorium with 100 people, right? Or even as big as like a government chamber of Congress, right? Where everybody's got individual microphones. You need to be able to turn a button to turn them on and off, right? Or you need to vote. You can vote on them, yes, no, abstain, things like that. We can build them all into the same system. But there's also a little mini speaker built into that unit right there. So when everybody else is talking around the table or 100 feet down from you, it's coming through your little speaker. I don't have to reinforce it into the room. That's going to help with AEC. It's going to help with feedback. It's going to help with everything else. I got my little individual speaker right there for every individual person so I can hear clearly what the person 100 feet down from me is saying. And those systems are useful too. But that's really bigger applications. It's not that 90% use case, right?
And we have some exciting stuff coming up in 24 into 25 where we will be utilizing pretty much all of the different microphones that you've just said.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it just depends on the project. The scope of that project is going to encompass a lot of different things.
Last question before we go into lighting. What size of room is, or what's that point of demarcation where you will move away from that all-in-one video and microphone and speaker, camera, all in one bar? What's, in your opinion, what's the biggest room you can have that?
I think that still goes to that smaller 20-foot room. I'm seeing some rooms down to 30, 35 feet.
With an all-in-one.
They're getting better because the speakers are getting a little better. The microphones are getting a little better. So as the technology progresses, we're going to see a lot more of that all-in-one kind of stuff. It really comes down to user experience. For me, that's the number one key for any conference room, right? And we talk about this for any AV system in general. But you want the experience of anybody coming in to be simple and just work, right? I mean, how many times do people get frustrated when they go into meetings and it takes 10 minutes just to get the technology working, right? Add up all the salaries that everybody at the table in that room for every 10-minute meeting that they have over the course of a year and see if that justifies the expense of a nice conference system.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to start up immediately when you'll have more computer issues than you will than the AV system itself, right? So when it comes to choosing the type of gear of what it is, microphones, speakers, camera bars, right? You can kind of scale it for the size of the room. But the key thing there is not only a consistent user experience, but that consistency across an entire enterprise. So 50 conference rooms, one conference room, doesn't matter. If someone goes to a conference room in Illinois or a conference room in Arizona, and we've got clients like this, right? We want that same experience. There's no question as to how to use the technology, right?
With that standardization and consistency, talk a little bit about MTR, Zoom rooms, and how that ties into this entire process too.
Okay, so everybody always says, "Hey, I want an MTR or I want a Zoom room,
and I want to press a button and it starts and it works perfectly."
Right.
That's what everyone wants.
Yeah, and that's not always the case. So the difference between like an MTR and a Zoom room is there's an appliance, i.e. a computer, living behind the TV that has that Zoom, Teams, whatever license living on it. So it's an assignable device within Office 365 or whatever your company's using, right? So the room itself, you can just join the meeting. You can walk into a room, no technology, join the meeting, have a call. Okay. But those rooms are nice. But every once in a while, or even majority of the time, I still argue that people want to bring their own laptop in and plug in and use the Teams client that's loaded on their laptop. They want to make the conference call.
Right.
And they necessarily don't want just Teams or just Zoom. They might have outside clients who use Zoom when they use Teams, right? And so you need to have that compatibility. It's getting better, but most MTR rooms aren't as easy to operate with Zoom, right?
Is there a cyber security concern when people are wanting to use their own device, or what do you see as the drawbacks there?
Well, there's cybersecurity concerns in AV in general, which is a whole nother topic of conversation that we can spend hours getting into. But I don't think that has necessarily anything to do with the software that you're using or the computer you're bringing in. I think that has to do more with the type of technology and terrible passwords integrators use to put on devices that are living on networks, right? I mean, what the Target hack that happened that hit everybody in the United States, it felt like they hacked in through a thermostat, right? So, there's other cybersecurity concerns that you're going to see, but I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with Zoom. Now, securing your Zoom calls are another thing. I got a great story about that. We did a city council chamber, right? And they had those kind of all-in-one speaker with voting and the microphones up along the dais. And then we had beautiful 98-inch TVs on the sides of everybody, and the gallery could see everything. They had speakers out there. They could hear the people presenting. And it was during COVID, so they wanted to do remote participants and all that kind of stuff, right? So we do the room, and this is so funny. We put the AV system in. I'm not there that first day. Everything was working great, so I leave. And I decide, oh, hey, I'm going to get onto the Facebook Live and just check out the call and make sure everything's going smooth at that conference room. And I'm at like some family thing with grandma and everybody, right? And I log on, and all of a sudden, in the presentation, on the 98-inch displays, through the speakers, someone starts playing porn.
Oh, no.
What they didn't do was secure the Zoom call. Right?
Unbelievable.
So they sent the link out, and then anybody with the link.
Imagine that person at home, though, that thought this is what I need to be doing with my afternoon.
Well, I know, but I start freaking out because I think somebody hacked something in our system and was sending it up on the displays, and it was going out. I'm texting the IT guy. I'm texting our programmer like, dude, you got to log on to this. Like, this is crazy. The guy runs up and just starts pulling the plugs on everything, right? They went back and analyzed. I thought it was, thank God it wasn't us, but they went back and analyzed it, found out they just didn't secure their Zoom call. Well, then not long after that, Zoom had pushed out an update where default passwords and securing of calls was the mandate, and you had to go into the advanced settings to shut that off, right? Because then you heard the things about college campuses and college schools, right, where they had random people dropping in on their calls.
That was a huge thing,
right? Because you were getting celebrities, and you just type in your Zoom meeting ID or your meeting ID of whatever your software is, hit go, and if there was one live, you just drop in on people's calls, right, completely unannounced. It was the craziest thing ever. So fortunately, they pushed out that update, and they're securing that kind of stuff now. But oh man, I'll never forget that. That's ingrained in my head. It is a fear, right?
We're learning as we go. These updates are happening. Talk a little bit about the lighting in the rooms as we go in and analyze those.
Yeah, it's like when we set up the lighting for these cameras for anybody that's watching the podcast, right? You're going to want to have shadow. You don't want shadows on your face, right? You want to have a nice clear image. You want to have that what we call that key light that's going to illuminate everybody's face. You're going to want to have like a backfill light, right? That's going to add a little bit of depth to the person and make them not look as flat on camera. We actually did years ago a county jail. The jail was far away from the courthouse, and we upgraded their video systems. This is before software. I mean, video conferencing was still super expensive then, right? It was at least 15 years ago. And so they wanted the transportation cost to take prisoners from the jail down for arraignments every day to go in front of the judge and then transport them back. So you've got cost of transportation, cost of personnel, you've got security risk, you've got all this other stuff that's going on, right? They said, we want to be able to video conference in a room in the jail. You get to go into the room and then be linked up over video conference to a judge, be arraigned, and then you go back into your jail cell, right? And so I gave them the estimate on what this was going to cost to do this. And they said, it has to be this room. And it was some terribly laid out room. It just looked awful. It's a jail, right? So they didn't have a lot of nice conference spaces, right? But that's the room they wanted to use. That's the room we put it in. I told them it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they said, oh, that's way too much money. And I said, okay, so let's break it down. What's the cost of transportation of prisoners and blah, blah, not even to mention the security risk. The system paid for itself in 4 months.
It's amazing.
Right. So the ROI was unbelievable. So instantly they bought the system. Cool. Well, the story about the lighting is they started getting complaints from lawyers, because a lot of the lawyers for the defendants were in the courtroom and seeing their clients on the video screen, and they looked terrible.
Interesting.
They just looked guilty, right? So how do you look guilty, right? Dark room, shadows on your face, shadows under your eyes, right? So they said, hey, and it was being proven that like this is a problem, right? And they mentioned this to me, and we just said, hey, you just fix this with lighting, right? So we fixed that by putting in some key lighting, some fill lighting within the room itself. It had nothing to do with the AV technology. It just had to do with the way the camera was capturing them and the lighting in the room itself. So lighting plays a critical role. Daylight, that's always going to be helpful. A lot of our conference rooms have a lot of windows. You don't want to have windows behind you when a camera's pointing at you, because it's going to have a hard time focusing with brightness and white balance and all this other stuff. But for the most part, you want to get that natural daylight. You want to get really clear, not just from overhead, because you don't want that shadow being cast on your eyes. You want to get nice fill lights. And we can help with that and lay that out. Nowadays, lighting designers on conference rooms they understand that stuff. And so it's usually put together very well.
How many guilty people did you get off because your lighting was so good? That's what that question becomes.
No, that's not what happened. I guarantee it. Other than myself. No.
And when it comes to control of the system, most cases it's a touch panel, correct? That's how we're going to control the display, the microphones, the audio in the room. Was that a correct assumption?
Yeah. So typically you get some kind of user interface. People mistake the user interface for the user experience. That's not the case. The experience is what you feel in the room, how the system works and operates. The user interface is that touchscreen. The touchscreen is going to be, power on, volume up. I'm a big fan of simplifying that as much as possible. I don't even want you to use it. Walk into a room, plug in your laptop. It will just know that you're there. Screen will turn on, your image will go up, your camera will come to here, audio, microphone, speakers, it all just happens automatically, right? But if you need to turn the volume up or down, you get the touch panel. If you need to switch to another person who's plugged in, you got the touch panel, right? And we simplify that layout as much as we can.
Right. And when we're working with facilities that have AV professionals on site, they want the user to have as limited access to that panel as possible, because that's when a lot of these service calls are happening and things like that. People get in. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, yes, right. We just did a ballroom, for example, different than a conference room, but they don't want the average person that's coming in renting the space for a wedding to be able to mess with the volume control of the PA system or turn projectors on and off, right? So we typically password protect a lot of that stuff and can secure that. Depending on room combinations, you can have audio flowing and new things coming up. You can get pretty crazy with it, but the idea is the back end is more complex, but we simplify it for the user themselves, whether it's password protected, whether it's automation of what controls they have based on your user level. We can do all kinds of crazy things like that.
Yeah, this has been an eye-opening experience for me over the last couple of years to see what goes into all this. And this right here, it simplifies years of learning into really 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, doing a lot of the teaching that I've done over the years, I wanted to give you guys a tool to explain all the questions you're getting, right? And for the sales team to learn, right? And know what they're getting into. So yeah, I mean, that's the simplification of it. Today's the educational podcast, right? We tried to tell everybody, if you're going to be, why do you need certain things in a conference room? That's today, right? We didn't get our fun guest today, but that's all right.
That'll be to come. And yeah, it was very informative, and hope those listening get as much out of it.
Have you seen any new AV tech this week though?
This week, I don't have anything.
Come on,
that night I was talking about the Shure 902. I mean, that's been new in the last couple months.
Listen, you recently went to the Sphere.
Oh yeah, I did go to the Sphere.
Okay, I mean, everybody talks about the Sphere, but give me your 30-second pitch on the Sphere.
It's a heck of a scheme they got going, because I didn't have a ticket going up to the window, so I made it was like a 20-minute hike, and then even more on top of that because it was during the Grand Prix, or the F1 was in town.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I get up to the window fully ready to go, and I was looking at ticket prices early in the day. It was like $89. I get up to the window and they're like, yeah, 400 level, it'll be $180. I'm like, do I have any other options? I'm like, no.
It's Vegas, baby.
Here's your money. But it was worth it. It was a once in a lifetime experience to see a giant elephant.
No, you didn't see
walking.
U2. You went to see the video
Correct.
that was there, right?
They have like a National Geographic type video.
That would still be cool.
But the audio in there and the way, your seat shakes as this elephant is walking towards you. It's incredible.
There's we could do a week on the different types of technology. I know that company very well that they actually designed and put that in. So.
And the entryway as well with all the technology, how about the robotics and it's crazy.
Holographic stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
they're hypervisions galore out there.
So you're suggesting go to the Sphere, is what you're saying.
Get ready to lose some money, but it's worth it.
Listen, if you're in Vegas, you're going to lose money regardless. I plan for losing money at the tables. I'll just take a little bit of that, and I'll go over to the thing. So.
It was a once in a lifetime experience.
All right, cool. All right, great, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, sir.
See you next time.